Good evening and welcome to the February 24th meeting of the Concord Select Board. And remind everybody our meeting is being both broadcast and recorded. Our first order of business is to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing ongoing litigation regarding Untitled Pond. To discuss strategy with respect to litigation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town, and the chair so declares. I would entertain a motion.
Move to enter into the executive session for the purposes of discussing ongoing litigation regarding Agog Pond. To discuss strategy with respect to litigation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town, and the chair is so declared. The executive session is needed to protect strategy discussions affecting litigation on the stated matter.
Is there a second?
Second.
The clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Mr. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Linda Escobedo, myself, aye.
And we note for the record that Ms. Hodgkiss is not present. So the motion passes. We'll adjourn to executive session to return to open session at 6 p.m. Welcome to the February 24th meeting of the Concord Select Board. The first item on our agenda this evening is Town Accountant's warrants. Gift acceptance, Friends of the Concord Free Public Library, a gift of $3,000 for library staff gift account. We're grateful for that. And then approval of minutes. From regular meeting, January 13th, 2020. January 13th, 2020, executive session not to be released. December 17th, 2018, executive session not to be released. February 1st, 2016, executive session not to be released. February 3rd, 2016, executive session not to be released. February 4th, 2016, executive session to be released. July 25th, 2016, executive session to be released. September 20th, 2016, executive session to be released. November 29th, 2016, executive session not to be released. June 19th, 2017, number 1 executive session not to be released. June 19th, 2017, number 2 executive session to be released. July 2nd, 2018, executive session to be released. July 16th, 2018, executive session to be released. November 13th, 2018, executive session to be released. November 19th, 2018, executive session to be released. October 10th, 2018, executive session 1 to be released. October 10th, 2018, number 2 executive session to be released.
And I believe you meant to say February 4th, 2016, executive session to be released.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah. And one-day special licenses at Trails End Cafe at 40 Stowe Street, the 27th of February from 6 to 9 p.m. wine only. Trails End Cafe at 129 Main Street, March 8th from 5 to 8 p.m. wine and malt beverage only. And the remainder of these are all for the Emerson Community Arts Center at 40 Stowe Street, and they are all wine and malt beverages. March 13th and 14th from 7 to 11 p.m., March 15th from 2 to 6 p.m., March 19th from 6:30 to 11 p.m., March 20th and March 21st from 7 to 11 p.m., March 22nd from 2 to 6 p.m., March 26th from 6:30 to 11 p.m., March 27th and 28th, 7 to 11 p.m., and March 29th from 2 to 6 p.m. If there are no objections, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the town manager's report. Mr. Town Manager.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just very briefly, we are currently having early voting. It'll be all this week here in the hearing room during normal business hours, so people should check the clerk's page for updated information, but all through Friday afternoon until 4:30 on Friday afternoon, we'll have early voting every day, so you can come out and have your voices heard and don't have to come up and don't have to vote on the 3rd and this on state primary day. So I hope people take advantage of it. We are going to be doing a okay.
Back in your,
So I just mentioned early voting this week. There'll be paving on Hawthorne Ave. I think on Thursday, weather permitting. The weather forecast is kind of spotty, and I'm sure you know you can't pave in the rain. So we're going to try and make some repairs there. Hawthorne's kind of beat up, and especially with the resumption of activities on Cambridge Turnpike, it's kind of an important thing to get put away. And finally, we don't do this an awful lot, but the painting here of our meeting room has been completed, and the floors out in the hallway, which I'm sure people at home can't see, have been refinished, and both turned out really
Very nice.
magnificently. And I want to commend the facilities department for really really doing careful work on both the paint and we brought in somebody for the refinishing, but there was a lot of prep work. They painted the hallway as well, and obviously there are a lot of treasured artifacts here in the room, and they were exceptionally careful in moving everything around and getting it done with, quite honestly, not disrupting the flow of our meeting schedule and work. So big kudos to them, and if you haven't seen it, come on down and check it out.
any questions for the town manager? All right, next item is my remarks. I have very brief remarks. Just to remind everybody that beginning tonight at 7 o'clock, we'll begin a series of public hearings in preparation for our annual town meeting at the end of April. Tonight, the articles here are on the select board agenda. Tomorrow night are the articles on the planning board agenda, and then March 9th is one of the two finance public hearings that is focused on budgets for schools and towns, and then on the 16th, finance committee hearing on the enterprise budgets. They will all be broadcast. They'll all be here in the townhouse. So that's really all I have in my remarks. And the next order of business is a review of the middle school approval process timeline. So, good evening, Madam Superintendent. Please join us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. I do want to let John Gariello, who is here as co-chair of the building committee, Court Booth from the school committee, sits on the building committee, so we are all here with me speaking for us. You're welcome to come up if you'd like.
No, I was
Only if
pointing to
you
you.
need. Only if you need.
You're here.
And Jared's here too.
And
Jared's always right by my side.
Okay, so the issue, just to introduce it and then turn it over to Superintendent Hunter. We have middle school building committee. They're working hard to finish their work. It seems with all likelihood that we will have a special town meeting sometime in the fall that would have a warrant article associated with funding for the middle school project. In addition, because it's would be a debt exclusion article, in addition to a town meeting approval, it has to be approved by the populace in town at an election. And the question sort of before us this evening is, when do we schedule both the special town meeting and the election?
Yes, thank you. So the building committee spent a substantial amount of time looking at the options because of the already scheduled votes at the federal level. There's options that wouldn't normally need to be considered and factored in. So the options we've been reviewing literally for months now. There's September 1st, which is a vote that's already scheduled, and then the presidential ballot on November 3rd. We did, as a committee, decide to consider a third option, and that's much of what I'm here to talk with you about, because that is the recommendation. So we settled on a time frame in between those two. September 1st is just too early in the fall. We're really still just coming back from summer, and it would force a lot of the informational pieces and other work that needs to get done would have to be in the summer, when we just don't feel people would regularly be available to receive and participate. We did look at the presidential piece, and I think we're all pretty open to say we can see pros and cons to both sides of this. The pro is that obviously you would expect voter turnout to be quite high and participation rates to be quite high. The con, which is where we have ultimately voiced our opinion as a committee on the whole, is that will things about the middle school project get lost in the publicity and the campaigning and the high level of attention we all expect this presidential election to have? And so the committee then decided to look at middle ground. And so we are coming tonight with a recommendation, and it is just a recommendation, to consider special town meeting on September 16th with a town vote on September 30th. And I'd like a minute or two to just talk you through some of the rationale for those, and then we can take questions.
Please.
So the first piece is that it allows us to stay on schedule, and part of the benefits of not working with MSBA is we are on a comfortably accelerated pace. We are not withholden to the bureaucratic timeframes and meeting schedules of MSBA, and we're very sure that cost equates to time because of the exponential increases we know are happening in the construction industry right now. So staying on schedule is a high priority for us, and this would allow us to maintain that pace. We are due to have a schematic design from our design team in August, so there'd be very little lag time between those. Some parts of what the building committee needs to consider is what happens between the end of feasibility and schematic design in August and the actual vote. So if we were to go all the way out to the presidential election in November, the town and committees need to make decisions on what's going to happen between the end of this part of the work and what would happen after the vote happens, assuming it were to pass. Most of the time, you try to be sure you can allow the designers to continue to work because it allows progress to be continued right on throughout that time frame. By only having a window of a month or so, we will have funds remaining in the 1.5 million that we are working under for the current warrant article that is funding this part of the process to allow the design team to continue to work. If it stretches from August to November, it's a much more substantial cost, and then in a minute I'll talk about the risks we take on by waiting till the vote in November. And so we feel like there's a real fiscal thought to this, that we can do it within the budget that we have to maintain progress and allow the design team to keep working. It's a very common practice to do that. There's nothing to be lost. If the vote doesn't occur successfully, then you've got those designs to better inform the community and keep the dialogue going at whatever time and place you decide to revisit the process. I guess thirdly is really just looking at the seasons that fall. So if we were to have a special town meeting and ballot vote in September of 2020, it would take a year's time to get the remaining design work done, which at that point you'd have floor plans and really high levels of detail. And that would allow us that year's time frame to work and still break ground in the fall of 2021 before winter comes upon us and can have such huge impact to the time frame of construction. The worries we start to have if we don't hit the fall of 2021 to break ground, winter can bring all these variables that exponentially increase time, and it's not just one for one. We can really, if you get a heavy, strong, hard winter, you can lose the entire winter, and then you're out not just the weeks we're talking about between September and November, but you could be out those months from October until you can actually get into the ground, perhaps in March. So that to us is very concerning on a number of fronts. One is, like I said, cost and time do have some relationship with each other in the construction process. The second piece for us in terms of building fiscal budgets, operating budgets, is you could potentially put yourself at risk. The goal is that we're into the new school for the fall of 2023. If the time frame on the early part of the project extends and we miss some of our spring of 23 tentative deadlines right now, you'll get further and further into the summer and potentially start to jeopardize the September opening of the school. My biggest struggle right now would be to figure how we would maintain 3 buildings, having some level of operation in one fiscal year, how we would build budgets for that, because at some point you could start to have that as a greater risk factor. So we're really weighing risks and potential costs versus efficiency and the high desire to have this be a project that this community is very, very much engaged in. So I guess the last point I'll make is that we think by putting it in September, it gets its own spotlight. The information sessions are very front and clear, available to people, starting this spring, through the summer, into the fall. And it just doesn't get lost in the complicated nuance of a political campaign at the national level. We think that actually brings more people out with a purposeful decision-making process rather than just being added on to a vote that perhaps they weren't even informed to come out to start with in November. So after a lot of robust, healthy, extensive discussion, that is our recommendation, that we would propose a special town meeting somewhere in the vicinity of September 16th and a town vote on September 30th. And that's what we're here to ask you to consider tonight.
All right.
Did I forget anything?
Just to
Come down. Yeah.
clarify,
I think if that's okay, Chair, there's one point that's worth making.
Sure.
That the cost of the ballot.
you need to introduce
I'm
yourself.
sorry, Dawn Goriello, 57 Bristers Hill Road, also the co-chair of the middle school building committee. One point that I think is worth noting is that the cost of the special ballot can be
Thank
covered
you.
under the
Yeah.
project cost because it is a project cost.
Sure.
So our understanding is that there's enough money in the 1.5 to cover the cost of the special ballot that would be required.
So before I entertain kind of questions, when is it necessary to know the answer to your question?
I don't know what the actual deadline is. Sooner the better, I would think, because we're driving all of our other timelines based on the timing of the meeting. So for us, the sooner the better is certainly preferred. If it takes longer, we're going to have more fluidity in our timelines and have a little more uncertainty as to what happens. So
To me, the difference, so my question is, the difference I see here is 1 month, 1 month and 3 days. Is that correct?
to us, it's a very important it's an important month because of the cost potentials and the risk factors increasing so much as we get closer to the winter months. And we just do not want to risk that. And the real feeling of the committee that they'd like people to really be able to hone in on this one topic and really make informed decisions in the month of September.
Questions?
Has the town clerk had an opportunity to weigh in on this?
Absolutely, CAR's been a big part of the
The
process.
town clerk is here tonight.
Yeah.
And
Actually I had shared with you a timeline, and if you don't mind passing that around. And I've got.
so this is an update of what you,
This is updated, yeah. And so this timeline shows the 3 dates that had been discussed. And what I did and where the red lines are, I'll just go through it. The warrant opening and the warrant closing and when the public hearing dates occur hinges on whether there are planning board or zoning amendment articles. So we have to factor all those things in because when the warrant opens, it has to remain open for 10 days and any petition articles that come forward have to be included. So I made some adjustments to what I had earlier noted. So the warrant opening, for instance, for if special town meeting was on September 16th, it would need to open by July 20th, closing 10 days later. And I'm not sure exactly of the timing of when council gets the warrant and those things, but I think those are dates that can be worked. I also wonder, before the select board finalizes the warrant, would you need to have the schematic design for the school? Because I noted that date was August 18th. Does that impact your finalizing the warrant? Because that affects the timeline. You know, where that is August 18th, so regardless of whether the warrant opens July 20th or August 3rd, if August 18th is an important date for you to determine when you finalize the warrant, then it brings the warrant finalization to the same date as if the special town meeting was on October 5th.
So what you're saying is the schematic design won't be ready till August 18th, but it would have to be in the warrant by, does the design, something about the design go into the warrant on the 24th?
That's what I don't know.
So my understanding was that whether it's in the warrant or not, the design is what's going to determine cost. So it's a pretty important piece of information. So, but you will have that in time for these processes to happen.
The warrant article would be the language for the debt
Right.
exclusion question on the ballot,
Right.
which does not include the price.
Correct.
That's a standard practice for all, municipalities in Massachusetts. It doesn't go, the price doesn't go on the ballot. However, for the community to be informed, to making the decision at town meeting, they're going to want to know how much it's going to cost.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. It's not, the language for the ballot can be approved really at any time because the cost is not on there, but the people who are voting are going to want to know.
And we're going to have preliminary numbers months and months and months ahead of that. We're expecting our first set of pretty good estimates to come to us by the end of March. So it will not be this big surprise piece of information that comes out August 18th, but it will be the final plan.
So I didn't understand, Karen, what you're trying to say. Between the 18th of August and the 24th of August, what does the select board have to do? That's 6 days. We get this information, do we have to vote something in there, or does staff have to type it up into a warrant? Or?
So I guess the point I'm making is the warrant closes on the 30th. If we look at the timeline for September 16th, if the warrant closes on the 30th and it's going to town council on August 1st, the select board could finalize the warrant a lot earlier if the schematic design wasn't something that was going to be on the actual warrant. And the idea being, how soon does the public get notice of the warrant? And how soon does the mailing go out of the warrant prior to town meeting? There's, there are minimum times.
Yeah, 2 days, I mean.
Yeah.
So we want to be sure that typically the bylaw says that the warrant needs to be mailed 2 weeks before town meeting, but the practice is to mail it a week before the public hearing so that people actually have the warrant in hand before the public hearings begin. So that's where the timing can get a little tight.
Linda,
Well, it sounds like you're saying we would have a number that was at least close. And, I mean, typically, we don't qualify that number when we include it in the warrant, but at least we would have something to give the public some idea of the magnitude of
Oh, yeah.
costs we're
the
looking at.
warrant would have to have a number in it that would be close enough to the motion at town meeting that the moderator would allow. So you can't put in $50 and then,
No, right.
Exactly, yeah.
so it's going to have to be
Yeah.
pretty fair estimate. She's
Absolutely.
tolerated sort of a.
And we'll
10%.
have those
That
numbers
period.
this spring, so that part's not concerning to us. Final design will be August 18th, but all the rest is going to move it along before that.
So, Carrie, in addition to, I think one of the issues that the superintendent raised is, a special election versus a general election and turnout and stuff like that. And you also provided us with some information about
Right, voter
that.
turnout. Yes, and historically, state primaries in the year of a presidential election are historically low because people are focused on the larger election, which I think would make it challenging for another election before the presidential election to to get adequate notice and adequate voter attention paid to it. The benefit of the debt exclusion language is because you don't need the dollar amount, we have an opportunity to include, and this is only for Proposition 2.5 questions, and only for state elections, that we have the opportunity, if we provide the language to the Secretary of State's office by the first Wednesday in August, to include that question
On the
on
ballot.
the presidential ballot, which is guaranteed going to be the highest turnout that we have this year.
Yeah, certainly the numbers that you provided us with,
Right, 85% turnout,
Yeah.
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 special town.
And town meeting provides the opportunity to really draw attention to the articles, so I don't think that it's entirely lost by having an August 5th town meeting, and then it's a month to further educate the population about the fact that there's going to be a local question on the ballot.
So, Terry, do you have questions of either the town clerk or the superintendent or Susan? Well, before we go any further, Ms. Hotchkiss is not present this evening, and I knew she would not be here. So I took the liberty of writing to her and telling her that she wanted to provide a statement that I would read it. I don't think I need to read all of it to you, but I think I'll read I'm torn between the importance of real town-wide engagement in all capital projects and, the same issue that you sort of raised. That being said, the building committee is a town committee with a reflective membership which debated this recommendation. As a parent, as well as a select board member, I'm acutely aware of our need to address our middle school facilities to benefit the students in town. Of a state-of-the-art consolidated campus is clear. I have been persuaded that the impact on time and construction costs of a delay in the special town meeting and subsequent vote, even by a month, is non-trivial and could result in a significant budget increase and the academic year in which the new facilities could be opened. I have also weighed the distractions of a national election on voter ballot education. Therefore, I support the committee's choice of option 2 with the strong admonition that the onus will be on all of us, the building committee of the town, to ensure voter education and awareness so that the special town meeting and the following ballot reflect the will of all Concord and not a passive minority. So I just wanted to read that into the record on her behalf. So where are we? Susan?
I'm ambivalent still, because I really think the importance of having as many voters as possible weigh in on and I also think that delay also allows another month for the communications group to get the message out and hammer it home. But I don't want to see us get into a hole on the other end without having enough time to do, have it ready for summer furnishing and all that stuff before the end of August. So I'm still torn, but I guess if I had to pick, I would rather see it happen on the federal election day.
Linda?
Yeah, I think we've got competing interests on this one for sure. The financial piece of this, in terms of the possible escalation of costs and the continuity of moving from the design phase to continue in a logical way, is compelling to me. But I think we also have an obligation to reach as many people in town as possible, and the statistics show that the presidential election is the place where they show up.
I'd add something to
Yeah.
it. I think there was some discussion, and Stephen, you would maybe remember, about Is there a way to find some funding, say the 1.5 million goes from the middle of August to the middle of September, is there a way to find funding so that process can continue? And I don't know that we know the answer to that.
I think the suggestion that I made at the building committee meeting was that if there was going to be a special town meeting to set a warrant for this debt exclusion question, if it was going to be the later date, then there could also conceivably be a warrant article to make some appropriation from free cash or some other source to fund the design, with the theory being the same people, 2/3 of whom would show up to make sure the question goes on the ballot, would also support the additional funding to make sure that gap in time that we're concerned about can be mitigated. And I think if I could just add, and I expressed this at the building committee, without a doubt, the best timeline for the project was the one that's recommended by the committee. So there really are, as you said, Linda, there's two competing things, and it's pretty clear choice. But I think, like I said, the turnout numbers are what they are as well. But there's less certainty in terms of holding the timeline with the other one. But
But if there was an additional warrant article that allocated money for that gap period, would that solve the problem?
It would eliminate a certain portion of the risk. The weather is the other big determining factor as to whether you get into the
Well, I mean,
ground.
But if you had the town meeting and there was an additional warrant article so that you could just continue ahead
So the only thing that could continue ahead would be the design work and the development through the architects. The actual construction is all embedded in that in the big number that would have to be approved at the special town meeting and the ballot vote. So construction could not start, but the design team
what
can continue.
construction would, I mean,
So let me split it up, because two things happen in two different timeframes. The immediate part that this would solve is allow the designers to continue to design in the fall of 2020. So
Right.
there's no stop in workage. The part that doesn't get mitigated is in this fall of 2021, and the way we may or may not break ground in November or into December, because we have had a whole year's worth of design work go on, and we're finally ready to do that. But if we get into the winter where we can't do it, that's where we start to still have considerable risk. So you've mitigated one piece of risk in 2020, but there's still risk in 2021, depending on how that process
So
plays out.
the comment you just made assumes that there would be construction able to start in late 2020?
No, so
No,
let me
I
do
didn't
that
think so.
again.
So, yeah,
And design work would continue in the fall of 2020
correct.
between the special town meeting and between the schematic design and the special town meeting.
Right.
The part that we would not be mitigating would be in 2021 in the fall. As design wraps up and we've gone out to bid and have a construction team on site, we would need to see how that year plays out as to when we can actually break ground. Because we're not going to have approval for the cost of the building until November of 2020, it could mean we can't get in the ground in the November or December timeframe of
That's the
2021.
part I think we don't understand, because if design is continuing, why does it slow it down a year later?
Can you help? Dawn's going to be able to give you better detail.
So, Dawn Goriello, Bristers Hill Road, also the co-chair of the middle school building committee. So what Lori's saying is that this year, the allocation of the additional money per the suggested warrant would mitigate this year's risk. So it would basically keep the designer from de-staffing, restaffing, right, between August 18th and November, when's the ballot? 3rd, thank you. So we have enough in the other scenario, just for additional information, under the 1.5 million, we can keep paying them through the September date without an additional warrant. The warrant would require that difference between September and November, right? So it would cover that gap. I think what Lori is saying is that potentially, if they continued, it may box us into having to go chapter 149 and do early bid packages, because if there's any sort of delay, or if the $1 million, or however much, whatever the warrant addresses, if that doesn't pass, then we're at risk for not getting in the ground. So I think if the warrant passes, then it could be a non-issue.
Oh, okay, okay,
So you're at risk of the warrant not passing.
okay.
So
But that's got nothing to do with the election. I mean, that's the special town meeting warrant.
has to do with town meeting.
Yeah, it's just put that other vote in the mix that we hadn't considered, because we wouldn't have proposed, that's up to you to propose use of free cash to do that, so.
How much would we be talking?
It's about, the difference between
Yeah.
August 18th and November 3rd is about 25% of the, so they're drawing for just over a year. I want to say it's 14 months or 15 months. So we're somewhere in the 20 to 25% of the total time to do design development and construction documents. So if they stopped in August and didn't move forward, then it would be a couple $1 million of their contract, I would say. Designer, it's about, 3 months out of 14?
3 months out of 14, so it's between.
Yeah, and they get about 10% of the total, construction costs. So, I'm doing loose math, but, so if they say it's $100 million, their contract in theory is 10, and you divide that by 15 months, and you take 3 months of that.
So I have a question. So the risk is then, if that doesn't pass, then where are we?
Then everything stops until the votes are in.
And then there's two risks, right? There's risk of the additional funds if that's a warrant that is put forward, if that doesn't pass. So they will have to go on hold. I mean, I guess the committee would have to decide, are we gonna spend the money out of our 1.5 allocation to keep them going until the town meeting? That's a
I
risk.
think
And
the
then from that
superintendent-
point to November, if the warrant passes, that's additional money.
Didn't you
Right.
indicate that you had the money in that?
We
believe
do.
we do for
We do.
those few weeks.
I'm not,
If
I
we were
can't
in
speak for the whole
September.
committee, right, and that would be a decision we would have to say yay or nay, right, based on the
Well, you have to
outcome.
make a decision, but the
Right.
first question is there money
There is.
available to
Yes.
make a decision
To
about?
get you through, what is it, September?
16 and 30.
So which is basically a month versus almost 3, August to November 3rd, just shy of 3 months.
But is it the town meeting vote difference? Because the town meeting is October 5th.
Okay.
So is it the
So then
town
it's 6
meeting vote
weeks?
then
Um,
opens?
I guess we'd err to all of you
Yeah.
to say that you're gonna count on a ballot vote that hasn't happened yet,
Well,
to assume you
I
have
could
funding
still
for
have
design.
the town meeting September 16th.
Right, but
and
you've only
have
got one
a-
of 2 required votes.
No.
The ballot has to
Projects have failed at the polls after they've passed at
Right,
town
no,
meeting.
right, but I
so-
mean, you could have the town meeting September 16th. You could have this extra article in there to put in some money for free cash, and you could still have the presidential ballot, the ballot on the presidential election day.
Yes, but you would not assume you've got funds without a special town.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's-
Another article.
That's
So
right.
my sense of what we should do going forward is, let's try to put together a piece that does that.
Yeah.
Right, town meeting on the 16th, the ballot question on the presidential one, and let's get worked out who's got what funds and how much funds
Yeah.
would be necessary as a free cash allocation
Right.
to
Continue work.
to do that. If we put that together and then
Right.
get that back here, it might be the case that it's just too much and it's too
Right.
risky,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
it
we can
just
certainly do that.
doesn't make any sense. And,
And if I could add one thing to that, to make sure that staff has enough time between August 18th and 24th, because I'm still a little bit unclear about how much warrant preparation has to be done between that time frame, just to get confirmed that.
I think it'll be okay. It's a
It's a tight
I
it'll be
think
a
you're right.
relatively small warrant.
Right,
So,
hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, one never knows,
But the
but,
rest of the warrant will be ready. It's just this one piece that we're missing, so,
yeah.
okay, so I think that.
And you
we're good
usually,
to
when
go.
you have a special town meeting for something, something else
Yep,
piggybacks on, or we take the opportunity, something comes up, so.
I think that's a great idea because, there are these two choices and they're both, I think Dr. Hunter made a really compelling case that we need to do that middle time frame, and yet to have 85% turnout is really important too. So if we can find a way to do both, it would be wonderful.
And I would say Jane's remark still holds pretty well, I think, as the superintendent pointed out, you're worried about the noise of a presidential election, so again, we've got a job to do if we're gonna go to the town with this kind of a financial ask. You
Yes.
know, we gotta try to keep that noise
Yes.
someplace else. All right, so, um,
Okay, so
Is
we're gonna
that-
bring you some more information.
and we can work together on putting it together.
Great,
You know,
yeah.
it's not here,
Right.
go do it and come back, so. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think the designers can project, knowing, because it is somewhat formulaic, and I couldn't do the math in my head either, but I think I came up with about $2 million.
That's,
Um,
that was my loose math.
So,
but,
but I think the designers can project ahead based on their experience and kind of give us a pretty reasonable ballpark number of what we would need in that warrant article to continue to design. I think those costs could be reimbursed back to the town through the project. And I think the biggest thing is, when I asked the superintendent what happens if it failed at either the town meeting or the ballot, the answer was, we need to do this, so we would just bring it back. And that's why I don't see the design money, even at the risk of a failure at the polls, as being poorly spent, because we have to continue to design a new facility, we have to continue to work towards
No,
it.
it'll be this, if it's $2 million, that's the
Yeah,
financial risk.
that,
That-
yeah, not the
that doesn't
100,
come back.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
All
we'll
right,
get that
thank you
through.
very much, I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Looking for the agenda?
Looking for my agenda. How does it get lost when I'm not going anywhere?
Next paperwork, I thought over here.
That's the motions. Huh? Well, I'm looking for an agenda, but like I had 9 of them, I'll just, no, that's all right. That's all.
He's got an extra set. Yeah, grab it.
Take this one, I don't need it.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is review Trails and Cafe violations, serving an intoxicated purpose. We received a letter from the police chief indicating that a server at Trails and Cafe had provided liquor, an adult over 21, to somebody who was intoxicated, and subsequent to drinking there, the person was in an accident. I believe it was on Lowell Road. And the chief wrote to us with the request that we issue a warning to Trails End Cafe. And so I did have occasion to meet with the management. I didn't meet with them, but I spoke with them to make sure they understood that we were going to do this. They've already taken a lot of steps to correct this situation. It wasn't as if the person came there sober and they fed him alcohol. He was already intoxicated when he got there, and I suspect sometimes that's hard to detect. But they were quite straightforward about not accepting this as regular practice and correcting the situation. So I would entertain a motion to issue a warning to Trails End Cafe, and if,
Okay. Move to authorize the Select Board Chair to issue a written warning to Trails End Cafe pursuant to the memo dated February 6, 2020, from Chief of Police Joseph O'Connor.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No, it is
Aye.
approved unanimously. Next, review of the Concord 250 Committee Charge. I've written the committee charge. The thing I'm having a hard time with is how we constitute the membership. I mean, there's some obvious kind of things that you would think about, but this is going to be an important committee, and so I need your advice and your input on this before we go. I mean, the draft as well for your input, but most importantly, the composition. Keep in mind, when you think about this, this committee is an executive committee, is going to be a high-level committee that will structure subcommittees that will carry out various tasks. But on this committee, you're going to need fundraising expertise, you're going to need high-level event planning, you're going to need a lot of very experienced citizens to participate in this. And so what I would suggest is if you have comments about the charge itself or comments about constituting membership, if you could get them to Jeremy and he will collect them, and then we'll hopefully have a more polished draft that we can review at our next meeting. Does that seem reasonable to you, Linda? Do you have a
I
comment?
just have a question in preparation for doing that. In the first paragraph, you mentioned the executive committee to oversee other committees. I think you meant subcommittees.
Yeah, subcommittees.
Okay. So you've already mentioned a few of the subcommittees that you have envisioned. Are there others at this time that,
Well, it's not so much me envisioning them, is looking back at 1975 and looking at the committee structure that existed there. There were literally, I would say, 18 subcommittees.
Okay.
And what I would be happy to do is provide that for everybody to look at. That might be interesting
be
to,
helpful,
and to the executive committee, once we get them going. What they'll actually do, that was a 200th, it might have a little bit more punch than a 250, I don't know. But yeah, it was quite extensive. So I'll get copies of all of that to you.
that would be helpful. And then related to that, I think the last time you mentioned that there was already a committee formed with other surrounding town select board members.
Yes.
So who authorized the constitution of that?
It was just, I just got pulled a selectman from Bedford, Lincoln, Lexington, Arlington, the superintendent of the national park, and a representative from Hanscom Air Force Base,
So somehow these people,
just to talk about this.
yeah, have come
So
together.
there's no,
Okay.
I don't think we would have the authority to construct a.
No. I didn't know if the national park had
Yeah,
already said that.
they've been very interested. They're going to be the focal point in a physical sense for a lot of the activities, and they were in 1975 as well. And as I said, there's a presidential commission that's issued its report. There's a piece of legislation before the state to create a state committee. So this was just things like transportation, safety, if you think about, so.
Yeah, lot to think about. So that's helpful in preparation to get you comments. Thank you.
Thank you. So committee liaison reports. Susan?
Yes, so last Thursday, the 13th, there was a middle school building committee meeting, which discussed timelines. They followed up on the school building committee forum. There's going to be another school building committee forum the 29th, I think. It's going to be at Peabody. The first one was at Sanborn, second one's at Peabody, in the Peabody Forum. So we all get to sit on the steps and know what it's like to be a middle schooler sitting on the steps in the not auditorium. There's a Thoreau Depot plan forum on February 11th, which several of us were at. It was well-attended, and there was a lot of interaction with, we had several stations, and there were things like density, style of buildings, what kinds of businesses people thought should be in which areas in the depot. So that was, I think, successful from the standpoint of getting a good turnout and good feedback. Historical Commission met on the 13th, and they discussed the 2020 Preservation Awards, which the ceremony is going to be at Tricon Church, I think it's the 20th of May. There had been an open meeting law violation filed against the Historical Commission, and they heard back from the Attorney General's office, who said they didn't see any violation of open meeting law. So that was resolved. And then they also noted, the planner noted that they've been receiving, their pipeline is full. They've been receiving a lot from different towns, open meeting law questions. So their responses are backed up somewhat. They talked about establishing or expanding local historic districts. One was Jenny Dugan Road, which I was at a HDC meeting last year sometime, and they came to the HDC asking, because there are mid-century houses there that they would like to preserve. So they're going to they're going to pursue that conversation. That's pretty much it for that. Concord, that was the Historical Mission. Personnel Board met on Thursday the 13th. That was a busy day. And they discussed the bylaw amendment that's on the warrant and the presentation that will be done at town meeting. And that was it.
Thank you. Linda, we have to just, as quickly as we can.
I'm
so we have-
Sure. I also attended the public forum presented by the planning board on the Thoreau Depot. I thought it was very successful. At ZBA, 1440 project was referred to town council for a legal opinion on a variance request. NMI, the Nuclear Metals Reuse Planning Committee, reviewed their experience with us at the select board meeting and are already looking at next steps for redevelopment of the property, as well as information that the select board requested. The Affordable Housing Trust Study Committee discussed their presentation for the public forum tonight, and that's a quick update.
Okay, quickly, I attended the same Thoreau Depot forum, very well done. Committee on Disability met. They're working with the Chamber of Commerce to install buzzers and/or small ramps in Concord Center, so people with wheelchairs can more easily get in. They're very interested in the Select Board's Transportation Advisory Committee, that
Good.
they want to keep abreast of that. And they're working with DCR on the Walden Woods accessibility improvements. I've been appointed to the MMA Fiscal Policy Committee. Mike has been serving in that capacity, and they want to keep Concord involved, so that's great. And the first meeting for me will be tomorrow. And on March 2nd, again, a reminder, we're having the public hearing for the Capital Planning Task Force. We really want to get public input. We'll have a few initial draft recommendations, but the public input is what we really are having the meeting for.
So a public forum, right?
Yeah.
A public forum?
Public forum, what did I say, public hearing? Public forum, yeah.
Thank you. I had chair's breakfast last week, as usual, very informative, but the issue that came up is a lot of conversation about not making good use of our green cards and the old green card process. So I want to get that on our agenda sometime soon to talk about how we do
Great.
that. I went to Finance Committee. They primarily were reviewing warrant articles. A Tax Fairness Committee met, and they were reviewing their presentation for the public hearing at town meeting. I attended Hugh Cargill Trust. They reported a change in the way the light plan is making donations to them rather than on a quarterly basis, an annual basis, and they reviewed their policy for supporting summer camperships. I attended the municipal light plant. They had a detailed discussion about cost of service and rate design, how to handle rate adjustments and RECs. They had a detailed discussion of renewable energy credit strategies, very interesting. And they had a review of their fund balance policy, which was brought to their attention by the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for them to write down their policy about what we would think of as free cash. It's not, but it's their reserve funds. And then I attended the Pollinator Health Advisory Committee, where they did two things, talked about their presentation tonight and at a town meeting, and then they're going to come before us sometime in the relatively near future to talk about the future of their committee. So that's all I have. There are no miscellaneous correspondence, committee nominations. Are there any public comments? Yes, ma'am. Got to be really fast.
Okay, really fast. Courtney Whalen.
Up here.
Sorry. Courtney Whalen, 65 Dover Street. I just wanted to request the select board consider the adoption of the Burlington's 5G small cell policy, which I've been in correspondence with Mr. Lawson about.
Yeah.
Currently, Concord does not have a small cell policy in place, and without a policy, the Concord residents in town will be vulnerable to the exclusive interests of the telecommunications company, therefore allowing the installation of 5G small cell antennas all over town with no input from the boards or people who live here. Currently, Burlington's implemented this policy. Bedford and Lincoln have both implemented this policy, and I would encourage
Yep.
you guys to invite.
It's going to be
Jim
on our
this.
agenda. We just get bogged down around this time of the year with town meeting and the like. So greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
We'll get
All
it.
right, I do
We'll
hope
get
that
it.
you guys would get this on the
Good.
agenda. soon.
Shelley, did you?
Thank you.
Shelley Morse, 50 Manuel Drive.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Thank you. I just wanted to notify, if not ring bells of alarm, the group tonight
Speak in your mic.
that the town will never accept the idea that we cannot participate in the discussions of what the issues are at Estabrook Road. That the idea that those must be held in secret for our protection is simply not going to be accepted. And the idea that we would consider paying any more without even knowing what the costs might be, again with the argument that it isn't good for the townspeople to know what the cost might be because we're not capable.
We'll be addressing that. I appreciate
But
it.
I'm sort of ringing a bell to say the town is going to fight this, and the article that is prepared now for town meeting does not even describe what the money is for. It never even mentions Estabrook Road. So that will be a very severe point that our town will want to make.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate it. I would entertain a motion to adjourn to the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.